The Supreme Court has delivered a historic check on presidential authority, striking down the core of President Trump's aggressive trade agenda. The ruling invalidates sweeping tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, declaring them unconstitutional and reaffirming Congress's exclusive power to tax and regulate trade. This decision forces a dramatic reassessment of economic policy, leaving the White House scrambling for a response as the tariffs are set to be lifted. The verdict sets a powerful precedent, constraining future presidents and fundamentally altering the tools available for foreign and economic policy. As the nation absorbs the aftershocks, urgent questions arise about American jobs, consumer prices, and the country's role in the global economy. To grasp the Supreme Court's decision, we need to revisit the events that led here. In April 2025, President Trump invoked the IEEPA to impose sweeping tariffs on imports from over 60 countries, citing national security and the fentanyl crisis. Critics argued the act was being misused, and lawsuits quickly followed, claiming the tariffs were unconstitutional taxes imposed without Congress. The legal battle escalated, and in August, the Federal Circuit Court ruled the IEEPA did not grant the president such broad tariff authority. President Trump appealed, warning of dire consequences if the ruling stood. The case reached the Supreme Court, with the nation watching as justices weighed executive power against congressional authority. The stage was set for a ruling that would clarify the limits of presidential power and decide the fate of billions in tariffs. On November 6, 2025, the Supreme Court struck down the administration's broad IEEPA tariffs in a 6-3 decision. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, reaffirmed that Congress, not the president, holds the power to impose taxes and tariffs. The ruling specifically targeted the broad tariffs imposed in April, affecting imports from dozens of countries, but left sector-specific tariffs, like those on steel and aluminum, intact. President Trump condemned the decision, but the Supreme Court's word is final. Businesses now await guidance on when collections will cease and whether duties paid might be refunded. The political fallout was immediate, with opponents celebrating a restoration of constitutional order and supporters decrying judicial activism. The decision has sharpened the debate over presidential power and the future of American trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision marks a pivotal turning point that will reshape the American economy in ways both immediate and far-reaching. This ruling doesn't just affect policy on paper, it has real consequences for businesses, families, and the nation's financial health. By slashing the share of imports affected by tariffs from nearly 70% to just 16%, the decision dramatically alters the landscape for international trade and domestic markets. For businesses, this means lower operating costs, as imported materials and goods become more affordable. Companies that rely on global supply chains may see their profit margins improve, allowing for potential reinvestment, expansion, or even hiring. For families, the impact could be felt at the checkout counter. With tariffs removed, the cost of everyday goods, from groceries to electronics, may finally ease, offering relief from the steady rise in prices that has strained household budgets. Tariffs are often passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices, making basic necessities more expensive for everyone. Their removal is expected to put downward pressure on prices, potentially making a wide range of products more accessible and affordable for American families. However, these changes won't happen overnight. It may take several months for the effects to ripple through supply chains and for consumers to notice meaningful price drops in stores. On the other hand, U.S. industries that compete directly with imports, like steel, textiles, and agriculture, may face renewed challenges as foreign goods become more competitive in price. The tariffs had acted as a protective barrier, shielding these industries from intense foreign competition. With that shield now lowered, some companies may struggle to adapt. The sudden policy reversal also brings a wave of uncertainty to the business community. Companies must quickly reassess their strategies, supply chains, and financial projections in light of the new rules. This recalibration could mean new investments for some, but tough decisions and restructuring for others, as the market adjusts to a new normal. While some economists argue that the overall impact on the $30 trillion U.S. economy will be modest, others warn that the effects could be more pronounced in certain sectors and regions. For industries and workers directly affected by increased competition, the adjustment will be significant and may require support or retraining. The ruling highlights the complex trade-offs in economic policy: lower prices and greater choice for consumers, but new pressures and uncertainties for domestic producers and workers. As some Americans benefit from cheaper goods, others may face job losses or reduced business, underscoring the need for thoughtful transition strategies. Navigating this new landscape will require careful adaptation, collaboration, and forward thinking from both businesses and policymakers to ensure that the benefits are shared and the challenges are addressed. At its core, the Supreme Court's ruling is about the separation of powers, a foundational principle of American democracy that ensures no single branch of government can dominate the others. This decision is not just a technical legal matter, it's a powerful statement about the limits of executive authority and the enduring role of Congress in shaping national policy. By redrawing the lines between Congress and the presidency, the court has reasserted the importance of checks and balances, reminding both branches that their powers are not absolute. By blocking the use of IEEPA for broad tariffs, the justices have closed a loophole that allowed the executive branch to bypass Congress on major trade decisions. Now the administration is forced to seek congressional approval for sweeping trade actions, or else rely on more limited, targeted tools that don't carry the same economic weight. This shift could fundamentally change how trade policy is made in Washington, making it less about unilateral executive orders and more about negotiation and compromise. In fact, the ruling may embolden Congress to reclaim its constitutional role in trade policy, encouraging lawmakers to take a more active hand in setting the nation's economic direction. If bipartisan cooperation can be achieved, this could lead to more stable, predictable rules for American businesses and trading partners alike. However, the path to such cooperation is rarely smooth, and deep partisan divides may still complicate efforts to forge lasting agreements. For President Trump, the decision strikes at the heart of his America First platform, which relied heavily on the ability to act swiftly and decisively on trade. The ruling is likely to fuel new political clashes between the White House, Congress, and the courts, as each branch seeks to assert its vision for America's economic future. The administration may now turn to the 1974 Trade Act for authority, but this law comes with its own set of restrictions and procedural hurdles. Sweeping tariffs under this framework are far less feasible, and any attempt to use them will likely face intense scrutiny from both lawmakers and the courts. The era of unilateral sweeping tariff actions may be coming to a close, replaced by a more balanced, deliberative approach to economic policy. The Supreme Court's ruling underscores a fundamental truth. When it comes to far-reaching trade decisions that affect millions, the president cannot go it alone. The future of American trade policy will be shaped not by one leader, but by the ongoing push and pull between all three branches of government. In this new era, the balance of power is once again at the center of the American experiment. The message is clear. In a democracy, no one branch can shape the nation's destiny alone. The Supreme Court's decision has sent ripples across the global economy, with America's trading partners welcoming a return to predictability. The ruling is being closely analyzed in financial centers from London to Tokyo, as investors and policymakers try to gauge its long-term impact. Many see it as a pivotal moment that could reshape the way the United States engages with the rest of the world on trade and economic policy. Countries like Canada, Mexico, and the EU see the ruling as a step toward restoring rules-based trade, while China remains cautious, noting that many tariffs still stand. European leaders have expressed hope that this decision will lead to fewer abrupt policy changes and more transparent negotiations. Meanwhile, Canadian and Mexican officials are optimistic that cross-border commerce will become smoother, benefiting industries on both sides. For multinational corporations and investors, the decision brings optimism and a sense of stability. Though other trade barriers remain, many global businesses are now reassessing their strategies, anticipating a more predictable regulatory environment. Some analysts believe this could encourage new investments and expansion plans, especially for companies that rely heavily on international supply chains. The ruling also has implications for the World Trade Organization, signaling that even the U.S. faces legal limits on unilateral trade actions. This development is being watched closely by WTO officials, who hope it will strengthen the multilateral trading system and encourage all countries to resolve disputes through established channels rather than through sudden tariffs or sanctions. The decision may encourage renewed investment in multilateral institutions to resolve disputes. Diplomats and trade experts are already discussing ways to use this momentum to rebuild trust and cooperation, not just between the U.S. and its allies, but also with emerging economies that have felt sidelined in recent years. While optimism is tempered by ongoing tensions, The ruling is widely seen as a move toward a more stable global trading system. Markets have responded with cautious enthusiasm, and there is a sense that this could mark the beginning of a new era in international commerce, one where rules and cooperation take precedence over uncertainty and confrontation. The world is watching to see how the U.S. will navigate its new legal and economic constraints, as governments, businesses, and citizens await the next steps. The hope is that this decision will foster greater stability, encourage dialogue, and ultimately lead to a more balanced and prosperous global economy. Legal scholars agree. The Supreme Court's ruling is a landmark for the separation of powers, forcing Congress to take a more active role in trade. Economists see the decision as a net positive, arguing that the removal of unilateral tariffs will foster growth and stability. Investors have responded positively, viewing the end of broad tariffs as beneficial for business. Some experts caution that the administration may pivot to more targeted, legally defensible tariffs, keeping trade battles alive. The consensus: the ruling clarifies the rules, but trade disputes and debates over protectionism versus free trade are far from over. The decision marks a pivotal moment, but the underlying tensions in global trade will continue to shape American policy. With the Supreme Court's decision, the government must now unwind the broad IEEPA tariffs, a complex process requiring clear guidance for businesses. The Trump administration is expected to focus on sector-specific tariffs, like those on steel and aluminum, which remain legally viable. Congress now faces a challenge: reclaim its constitutional authority over trade or risk continued executive overreach. This could spark new legislative efforts to modernize trade laws and clarify presidential powers. For businesses, the end of broad tariffs means reevaluating supply chains and pricing, but uncertainty remains as targeted tariffs persist. Consumers may benefit from lower prices, but the trade landscape is still shifting. The future of U.S. trade policy will depend on how Congress, the White House, and the business community adapt to these new realities. The Supreme Court's decision is a reminder that the principles of government and trade policy affect us all. Now is the time to get informed, learn about the laws shaping trade, and understand the arguments on both sides. Make your voice heard, contact your representatives, attend public forums, and participate in civic discourse. With Congress regaining authority over trade, constituent opinions matter more than ever. The debates over trade and executive power have real-world consequences for every American. Stay engaged. Your participation will help shape the nation's economic future.